Oh, great. Well, it's my great pleasure to be here on sort of fly in quite late last night to join you. I quite like the fact that, like, the idea of, well, this is a Mahayana sutra right now, and beings are kind of coming in. I could say I went on the last train from London, but maybe I flew on a ray of moonlight. No one knows who was awake to see me. And I'm also very, very pleased to do this particular theme. You're looking at this theme of the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa over the weekend, and then a few of us will be staying on to study in more detail the actual text itself. Yes, I love the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa, and it's in a way my esoteric or secret manual on how to build a Buddhaland. It's informed much of my inner life. Sometimes even I wonder how I do what I do. I think, gosh, this is turns out running 2 retreat centres, I'll come back to this in a minute, it's quite a lot of work, as well as everything else. But I really feel like when I first came across this text and started studying it in more depth, it's given me a whole mythological kind of landscape of building a Buddha land, and really my whole life's work. I really mean that genuinely, my life's work. And in a way, the whole movement of the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa, and also Bhante's enthusiasm for it, all those talks that I'm sure you've been told about that Sangha actually gave on this text, the sutra itself, Bhante's talks on it, they sort of turned me and are turning me consistently from a project of sort of self-adornment and self-grasping, a kind of closed life based on just trying to get what I want out of the world and get rid of what I don't want, into a much larger project of bringing something collectively into being that is of profound meaning and beauty. And I really do feel like there's a possibility to do that more and more in this world. And this is the manual of how to do it. It's a slightly strange manual of how to do it. Takes a little bit of work, but it's a kind of mythic manual of how to do it, an esoteric manual. And as you've heard yesterday, it starts off with an evocation of a scene far, far beyond ordinary consciousness. We're in Amrapali's park. Now, Amrapali was a great follower of the Buddha. She was also a courtesan. So there's a kind of little, what shall we say? It's not quite a joke, but there's a slight provocation at the beginning even of the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa, because here she was. She's in some ways quite a worldly woman who, very, very beautiful, lived on the basis of her ability to entertain men, basically. And she was a very, very generous benefactor of the Buddha, and had a lot of faith for the Buddha. And there's a little story about her shortly before the Buddha died. So this is when the Buddha was an old man, and he was coming into Vaishali with his followers to do a kind of teaching tour. Sometimes the Buddha would wander about and just teach the truth as he knew it. He was a wanderer. And he comes to Vaishali, and we'll come to the Licchavi youths later, but there's the Licchavi youths, so a great gathering of young people in their chariot going to meet the Buddha and ask him to come and take a meal with them. And as they were going along in their chariot, Amrapali came along in her chariot, and she got her chariot to bump into their chariot and cut them off at the pass. So they were going axle to axle. There was a standoff between the youths and Amrapali. And she sounds like a great character, Amrapali. And the literary youths were like, "What are you doing? Why are you crashing into us?" And she said, "Look, the Buddha is coming to town, and he's going to eat with me. And the Licchavi youths were saying, damn, she got us that mango woman, because that's what her name means. She was very voluptuous, so she was named after a mango. So you get a kind of, there's a little story, which, kind of like a little joke, a little funny story, right in the heart of the beginning of this contested space of Amrapali's park. Anyways, the Buddha stayed at Amrapali's park, which he donated to the Buddha and his followers. And everyone's there. The Buddha, as we've heard, 8,000 enlightened beings, 32,000 bodhisattvas, tens of thousands of gods and goddesses and mythical beings like dragons and garudas and yakshas, which are kind of like demons, and kind of almost like kind of mermen, sort of partially man, partially snake or some sort of fish. And all these monks and nuns and lay practitioners. Everybody's there. And at the center of it all is the great Buddha shining with his golden light on a lion throne. And all the attention is turned towards the Buddha. And in a way, this great sort of mythical start to the sutra is an invitation to us. Imagine what it must have been like to be there. Imagine what it would have been like. You'd have to completely broaden out your conception of what the possibilities for consciousness really are. You're in this different world where it's possible to gain complete liberation from greed, hatred, and delusion. It's possible to devote your life entirely to the benefit of all, to the liberation of all. It's possible to be completely and utterly, irreversibly creative with unfolding love, wisdom, and energy. There's a possibility at the heart of it all, and you're in relation to that. And the world is much, much bigger than you ever thought it was. The possibilities of the mind are much, much bigger than you ever thought was possible. It's a sacred realm, and it's alive with many different kinds of beings. And who should turn up but the 500 Licchavi youths? Maybe they want to get their own back on Amrapali. And who are the Licchavi youths? It's one of these things that if I had more time, I'd like to write a paper on who are the Licchavi youths. I've been doing a bit of research. They come up again and again and again, actually, in many of the texts in the Buddhist tradition. And they've always got a particular sort of flavour. They sort of straddle the line between historical beings and mythological beings. They were a tribe in that particular area of Vaishali who were known to have a very harmonious society, lived in a very harmonious society, in peace with each other, very kind, unified, good governance. They were part of what was called the Vajrayan Confederacy, which basically means they worked together with each other and with any other tribe in that local area, and governed themselves very well, sort of edging towards a democracy, I suppose. Apparently, if someone was sick in their particular tribe, everyone would go and look after that person. They really, really looked after each other. And often the Buddha would call them a sort of epithet, which means something along the lines of, you come from a good family. I don't think that necessarily means he knew what their family situation was and their mum and their dad, but there's some people who are brought up in a good society, and they're sort of they're positive, integrated, happy, healthy human beings. And they had this interesting mix of enjoying themselves a lot, and particularly dressing up. So there's long descriptions in the Buddhist texts where it's clear that they really like to put on a kind of show, you know. They, there's one bit where they had, so there will be some Licchavi youths with, dark blue horses and chariots, dark blue reins, for the horses, dark blue turbans, 5 dark blue insignia, and dark blue garments and decorations. And sometimes it said dark blue skin and hair. Likewise, there were yellow horses and chariots and yellow reins and yellow turbans and yellow 5 insignia. I'm not quite sure what that is, but anyway, 5 insignia, yellow garments and decorations. And likewise, there were some that were dressed up in red, and some that were dressed up in green, some that were dressed up in white. So they'd kind of have, I don't quite know how you get a dark blue horse or a green horse or a yellow horse. But clearly they must have painted their horses, and their hair and their skin, and the whole outfit to go with it, including the jewelry. And yet they were very, very disciplined. So, they used to sleep on blocks of wood. And they were very, very good at archery. Apparently they're very well known for their archery, the Licchavi youths. And the Buddha obviously respected them a lot. He liked them a lot. You just sort of get that tone. Maybe I have to say I do read quite a lot into ancient Buddhist scripts, and possibly with quite an eye of imagination. But my imagination tells me that the Buddha really liked the Licchavi youths. He just liked them. They'd come along and he'd say to his followers, he'd say, like, yeah, look, there's the Licchavi youths coming. He said, if none of you have been to the heaven of the 33, that's what they look like. And you can imagine him saying that, and all the monks just standing there, just really enjoying the fabulous nature of the Licchavi youths. Like, you knew when they were rocking up into town. And in a funny kind of way, I think who the Licchavi youths taking place in this sort of cosmic sutra, this great Mahayana text, why is it them appearing and not anyone else? You know, it could have been much more sensible than had a load of monks turning up quietly in order. But it doesn't start with that. It starts with these great characters of the Licchavi youths, who are disciplined, but also enjoy themselves a lot and like to go on picnics. That's the other thing. I think it's sort of saying that they are us, in a way. They are us rocking up to see the Buddha. And, it's sort of saying something about the nature of the Buddhist life, which is the nature of the Buddhist life is that we work on ourselves to become integrated, a certain amount of discipline, but also a certain amount of just enjoyment and positive emotion. The story starts of the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa when we've got ourselves into a good place, emotionally speaking. You know, we might have started from any kind of walk of life. We've got different backgrounds, different conditioning. We've got our own joys and our own tragedies in our life. But the story of the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa is starting when we've got ourselves psychologically into a good place. Enough to take on the truth about reality. And one of the points that Sangharakshita made when he was first came over to the UK after being in India, and he was working with a lot of young people. He had a lot of young people in the Sangha, and he sort of noticed something about the young people in the UK back in the 60s, but I think it's true now, which is that we put a lot of emphasis onto what's going wrong in our lives and the traumas that we've experienced and the difficulties that we've experienced in our lives. But he said that what he noticed with young people at that time, you can decide whether it's true of you now, is that often we actually repress our positive emotion. So he said there's a lot more positive feeling repressed than we think. We mustn't always think that what is repressed is negative. Quite often we repress the better side of ourselves, not the worst. Some forms of psychology have accustomed us to thinking that whatever is repressed is something nasty and negative, but I don't think this is true at all. There's at least as much good repressed. In some cases, maybe more good than bad. People are, in many cases, better than they look, better than they behave. Give them half a chance, as on retreat, and that goodness starts coming out. You can see a lot of goodness underneath, not all sorts of nasty, dirty little things squirming underneath that black stone. On the contrary, you can see some very good, beautiful things that don't get a chance to emerge, including the sense of gratitude and thanksgiving. So that's interesting. I think that's something we can consider in ourselves. Is there actually a Licchavi youth trying to get out? Of course there's difficult things. Of course there's greed, hatred and delusion. There's another little story about the Licchavi youths where they were doing their target practice with their archery. It's not like that, is it? Anyway, however you do it. And they were practicing and they were hitting a target perfectly right in the bullseye every time. They were enjoying themselves very much, just shooting their bows and arrows at this target. And Ananda happened to walk by, who was a great companion of the Buddha, friend of the Buddha. And he watched them for a bit. He was enjoying watching them. He was like, wow, every time, just look at them smashing it. Maybe he didn't say that. But he clearly was there. He was over there a while looking at the Licchavi youths. He came back to the Buddha and he said, oh, when I was on my arms round today, I saw the Licchavi youths. You'll never guess what they were doing. They were just hitting the target straight off every time. And the Buddha said, well, that's how you need to train your mind, Ananda. He was sort of making a point, I think. Let's move it on, Ananda. He said, you need to train your mind like this, that you need to pierce greed, hatred and delusion with your arrow right on the mark. So you do need to pierce your own greed, hatred, delusion, depression, anger, all the nasty little things squirming, as it were. But there's also, as part of that process, there's also seeing that what's released when the arrow hits the target is a little spark of energy and delight and goodness. The Licchavis represent positivity, pride, awareness, love, faith, and underneath the stone is something magnificent. The fabulous, the positive pride. I think that's part of my job actually is on the ordination team is really clocking the goodness in other people. There's all sorts of psychological problems that happen and come up on retreat and we work through together. And it's good to be able to really be aware of that and to work with that creatively. But also, there's something very, very good in people. And that comes out in the story of the Licchavi youths holding their parasols. As Sangharakshita says, they're their individual aspirations. They've got these parasols. In the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa, you'd call it their Adya Ashaya. And the Adya Ashaya is, Ashaya means like a vessel. Actually, it means like a vase or a vessel. It can mean one's sort of heart wish. Sort of contained, there's a relationship in the word between the vessel and the heart. It's your deep motivation, your heart wish. And Adya means the kind of higher, supreme heart wish. And that's what these parasols represent. They represent their individual aspirations, their heart wish, their strong purpose or intent or their determination. And for the Licchavis, their determination is to praise and to honour and to ascend. There's the aspiration towards liberation for all, which is the bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta, I'm sure, has been explained to you yesterday, but the bodhicitta is the heart or mind set on liberation for all beings. But when we say bodhicitta, we can become very, very formulaic about what the bodhicitta is. It's like, well, there's this thing in Buddhism called the bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening. Chitta means heart or mind. So it's the heart or mind set on liberation for all beings. Jolly good. But look at the symbolism. Look at the symbolism in the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa, because those individual aspirations are parasols. And in ancient India, a parasol was put over the head of someone you love and respect, to protect them from the sun. It's a bit like here we put an umbrella over someone's head to protect them from the rain. It's very rare we'd need a parasol to protect from the sun, sadly. But it's a sign of kind of honor. There's another story where, which has a different version of this in the Mahavastu, where all the Licchavi youths come to, put their umbrella over the Buddha, and the Buddha thinks, well, he doesn't want to leave anyone out. So he does this magical trick of creating many, many Buddhas, one to go under each parasol. But this one's a little bit different. This one, he unites them all. So what he's doing is uniting all these individual aspirations that want to ascend, to transcend themselves, that want to see the world as sacred and to have something to honor and respect and look up to. I think that's what the parasol is. I think the bodhicitta is this sort of, it's this awakening of the heart that longs for something more. Sometimes it's even nameless, something more, not just for myself, a greater capacity, a greater ability to love, a greater ability to see into the truth of things. And we long to have something to look up to honor, to respect, to revere. And that's symbolized by this sort of beautiful jeweled parasol. It says they're made out of jewels reflecting the light, almost delicate, almost exquisite. There's something in us that wants that exquisiteness of something to look up to, something to see as sacred, a greater possibility of the human consciousness. And we want that not just for ourselves, but for everyone, because we can see it, just like the jewels glint in the light and sort of send off little rays of light. So we see it in other people. It's not just our own. We see something exquisite and sacred in ourselves and our potential. And we see what's exquisite and sacred in other people. There's something precious, so precious, a jeweled parasol, made out of love and respect, sheltering us from the sun. So I think it's good to think about in yourself, what is most sacred to you? What's most precious in your life? What do you honor and protect? And what are you kind of determined to become? So the Buddha unites these jeweled parasols into one great parasol that reflects the entire cosmos, which is a very, very beautiful image. It's saying that we're not alone in our aspirations. How wonderful. How wonderful. Like you were mentioning that time on the bus, I remember it so well. I remember it because I had this kind of nameless longing that had not been so far met by anything really in the world. And I had all sorts of half-baked notions, crazy ideas about what the world really was about. And then I read the Three Jewels and I thought, this person knows what I'm talking about and he's taking it further. That's what I remember. I was like, wow, I kind of thought a little bit of that, but I didn't think that, he's taking it so much further. And I remember I was so joyful because I thought I'm not alone. I'm not alone in my aspirations. Sometimes having that precious aspiration to something more can be almost quite painful. particularly when it's not meant. It's very, very intense. I don't know if other people find that. I find myself very, very intense. So with the dual parasols, taking those one single aspiration, the Adya Ashaya, and making it into one large parasol that reflects the entire cosmos. It's also saying, one is you're not alone. There's no individual parasols. One is you're not alone in your aspiration. The other thing is saying it is part of the workings of the universe. I don't even know how I can explain that. I just deeply know that it's true. Sangharakshita talks about it as the cosmic going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. He says there's a tendency in life that wants to transcend itself. And we see this at all levels, and that there's also a possibility in this world that latent within every sphere of consciousness is the potential for Buddhahood. And we know it. Somewhere we know it. There's another sutra which I really love, actually, where it's described like this. It says, just as a sparrow, before it's broken through the shell of ignorance, utters the sparrow's cry, so living beings, before they've broken through the shell of greed, hatred and delusion, they utter the cry of shunyata, emptiness, unconditioned and unconfined. There is a possibility in the universe of being unconditioned and unconfined, to be truly liberated, to have a completely irreversibly creative consciousness with unfolding love, unfolding wisdom and unfolding energy. And somewhere we know it, because it's there as a possibility in the universe. So this great parasol is not just our own aspiration towards that great longing. It's also all of our aspirations, and it's also part of the workings of the universe, that latent within every sphere of consciousness, Buddhahood is possible. So when Sangharakshita talks about this, he talks about the united aspirations, the force for good, active and operative in the world. And that those united aspirations, that united Adya Ashaya, is more powerful when it comes together. So it's very easy to get downhearted. It's very easy to get downhearted looking at the cruelty and suffering in the world, which is very, very manifest. I think we're geared up in a particular way for disaster, particularly in our modern world. I've been looking a little bit into research on the effects of mobile phone use on the brain itself. And what happens is, because we've got constant access to stimulation, our nervous system is always geared up, because we're used to being able to be stimulated in a particular way through our phones, particularly that spark off fear or excitement. So we look for things on our phone to give us that sense of fear or excitement. We're always basically used to being slightly on edge, slightly alert to danger or excitement. And if we don't get that danger or excitement, we start inventing it, or we just go back on our phones, because we just used to being stimulated in a particular way. And then the nervous system is geared up for threat all the time. Our nervous systems become geared up for threat. And that stops us from seeing what's there. It's a bit like, it used to be that when you took the bus or a tube or a train, you sat there and looked out the window. Like there was no entertainment. None. Can't imagine what that's like. You sometimes just watched the little bits of condensation drip down the window and invented little shapes of what they look like. It turns out there was an actual advantage to that. And the advantage to not having a overstimulated nervous system is that you can start to see more subtle things in your experience. And one of those subtle things that one can experience is what is sacred. You can start to experience this longing to transcend. It's quieter. I think that longing to transcend, the sense of sacredness, the sense of possibilities of human consciousness are somehow quieter, but very eloquent and very profound. And that's why on retreat we ask people to turn off their phones so that you can start tuning into something different in yourself and start to tune into something different in other people. Maybe you're starting to tune into each other's jeweled umbrellas, jeweled parasols. You're starting to tune into your own Adya Ashaya, this intent, this determination, this longing for what is possible, and you're tuning into other people's Adya Ashaya. And on the basis of that, a subtle and eloquent voice comes into being. And that voice is a voice of praise and delight and reverence to what is sacred in the world. So in the next part of the sutra, the leader of the Licchavis, Ratnakara, praises the Buddha. And in a way, he's praising the possibility of a creative mind. He's praising the possibility of limitless love, energy, and wisdom, qualities that are inherent in the universe and in us, but are brought into fullness in this figure of the Buddha. So I'll just read you a couple of, it's a very, very beautiful, quite long passage, so you have heard it, or you will be hearing it in the sutra recitation. He says, I pay homage to you, ascetic, who lead us on the path to peace, with your large eyes bright and pure like the fine petals of a lotus, pure in motivation, having contained the pinnacle of the perfection of peace, with such a store of virtuous deeds that the extent of your good qualities is beyond measure. Behold the miraculous power of the guide, a bull among men. The sublime radiance of this sublime one's domain stands revealed, and the lofty teaching of the supreme Dharma that leads to the deathless is heard in its entirety in this world from the vault of heaven. And thus it goes on. We'll be looking at that in the seminar, actually, in the whole thing, because it's also quite a philosophical text. So we'll be looking at that with the Sanskrit as well. So very, very beautiful, very subtle words towards the Buddha. And in a way, you can hear this as a kind of hymn or a prayer or a little pulse of eloquence that's running through all the universe, the cry of shunyata, unconditioned and unconfined, in all experience, were one to tune into it. And on the basis of listening to that quiet voice, that subtle song, he asks a real question: how to purify the Buddha land, or the Buddha field, the Buddha Kshetra. So what is the Buddha land? The Buddha land, in essence, is the sphere of influence of the Buddha. Here you've got the Buddha in the midst of the assembly, shining with golden light on a lion's throne. And you can really feel the effect of that being on the assembly. But in a way, it's describing a process that happens all the time. We all exert an influence on other beings. If you're a Buddha, you exert a much, much, much stronger influence than other people, because you've got a very, very concentrated mind. The more concentrated you are, the more of a sphere of influence you have. And in a way, this is part of the enlightenment experience itself. Enlightenment is not a one-sided affair. It's not just about me and my mental states. As you become closer to the truth about existence, you start to realize that you're not fixed or not separate, and you cannot but have an influence on other living beings. The way Sangharakshita talks about it is, he says, the logical corollary of the Buddha's conception of enlightenment, thus the Buddha's Bodhisattva's quest for enlightenment, does not involve merely his own development, although that is of course primary. It must also involve his cultivation of a whole field of living beings. So our retreat centre in Wales, where we help train women for ordination, it turns out, some of you might know, is too small in quite a big way. So a while ago we embarked on a crazy project of raising money to buy a bigger place, and fortunately we bought a bigger place. But it's not just any bigger place. The bigger place that we ended up buying is an old Carmelite nunnery. And the Carmelites are founded on a basic principle, which is that they think that a life, in order to have a functioning society, you need some people devoted to a life of prayer and meditation. And that if you do have a community that is totally focused on prayer and meditation, it will have an effect on wider society. It's quite an interesting premise. I've really taken that to heart, actually. I've been reading that they've left behind. The nuns were very, very pleased that we're coming to take over their nunnery. They were very sad to leave it. Many of them had lived there for 50 years. And they definitely wanted to sell to us. And they left behind a whole book of the biography of every nun who's lived there, and every nun who's buried in the graveyard that we now own. And I think they're onto something. It's given me a bit of confidence that we do have an effect just by the nature of how we live together and how we are together. And it's part of the nature of things to sort of create a world around us. If you have a community that is totally dedicated to the liberation of all beings, however you envisage that, that will have an effect on other people. And it will have an effect on society. Of course it has an effect on society. How could it not? Because the nature of things is we're not fixed and we're not separate. We're always having an influence. But of course we can choose what influence we actually have. And we can have a creative influence, or we can have a destructive influence. But if you devote your life to spiritual practice, and you come together with other people who devote their lives to spiritual practice, then you're going to have a very, very powerfully positive effect on the world. I think that's true, and I think we're going to do it, and we are doing it. So when the Buddha answers Ratnakara, he makes two very important points. Well, three actually. Three very important points. The first point is that the Buddha field is a field of living beings. So the Buddha field is not a place. It's not somewhere nice like a kind of sort of enlightenment resort. There probably is a resort somewhere called Nirvana. It's a spa. There is a spa. I knew it. They haven't read the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa. If they read the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa, they would find out that Nirvana is not a place that you can just go and relax and have a good wash. It's a people. It's a community of people. It's a community of friends. It's not someone's kind of own project that like a cult that they're a kind of head of, you know, and everyone comes into my Buddhaland and I tell them what to do, much as that might be tempting. It's something that we mutually create, we mutually create together. It's a unity of all our aspirations, not just one person's aspirations, our mutual development. The way that Sangharakshita talks about it is, he said, the Pure Land has to be a joint creation built by a number of bodhisattvas working together, a community of people inspired by the same ideal, the ideal of supreme perfect enlightenment for the benefit of all. So it's a joint creation. The way the Buddha talks about it in the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa, he says, noble youths, a Buddha field of bodhisattvas is a field of living beings. Why so? Bodhisattvas embrace a Buddha field to the same extent that they cause the development of living beings. They embrace a Buddha field to the same extent that living beings are trained. They embrace a Buddha field to the same extent through entrance into a Buddha field, living beings penetrate the wisdom of the Buddhas. They embrace a Buddha field to the same extent that through entrance into that Buddha field, the noble spiritual faculties of living beings arise. Why so? Noble youths, a Buddha field of bodhisattvas springs up from the aims of living beings. So what it's saying is it's us together. It's all of our aims, all of our aspirations, all those little quiet whisperings of sacredness, all joining together and creating something mutually. And there's no point in creating something together unless living beings live out their potential and their aspirations. There's no point in doing it unless people are matured and developed and trained and penetrate the wisdom of the Buddhas and the noble spiritual faculties of living beings arise. That's what the purpose of it is. It's not about the building. It's quite hard to remember this when you've just spent £2.8 million on a building and are in the process of renovating it. One can get quite kind of utilitarian about the whole thing, especially as more money is needed. And it's good to remember that, in our communities when we're having discussions about all the things that one has to have a discussion about, sort of sewage treatment plants and fire doors, plumbing and electrics, that it's not really, those things aren't ends in themselves. What they're about is about living beings growing, developing, and delighting, coming into a kind of field of mutual delight. Where I've just come, the reason that I came so late is I've just come from our new place that we've bought, and the team from Alfoxden have just come and joined us to help work, which is very, very generous of them, I must say. And they're such a delight to have there. They love it. They were like little Davers and Davies sort of shimmering round the place in their jackets, those, what are they called, fluorescent jackets. Like, you've got to wear it because it is effectively a building site. But anyway, they were kind of going around in their fluorescent jackets and just delighting. They were like, oh, look, have you seen it here? This is wonderful. It's amazing. And it's all ours and we can come here. And I thought, oh, yes, this is what it's about. It's a field of mutual delight, of mutual growth, of community together. And we were all going around and saying, what qualities would we like to bring into being in this place? And you could see everyone's own sort of personality coming out. Some people were saying, well, hope is a place of awareness. Some people were saying sacredness. Some people were saying joy and laughter. And all those things were being brought into being, us just together. We did a dedication ceremony in the library. We were meditating in the library. I've got to say, the library is just so wonderful. It's huge. It was going to be filled with books. Anyway, so we were there all delighting in this library and bringing into being all these things. And it was there. It was happening already. We don't have the fire doors. The electrics is still in process, as are other things. But the beings are coming. The beings are there, and they're delighting and they're growing by being there. The image of the Buddha field is a land, is a field, is a garden, where we all grow in our own individual ways. It's a field of friendship. And friendship has got to be the defining feature of a Buddha field, because it's how we come together and unite our aspirations. This is what's so wonderful about this, is about a retreat center and about retreats and about our order and movement, where friendship is at the very heart of everything. You can have whatever building you like, but it has to be filled with the sound of friendship. We create it together. And the second point is that with all your practice, the way you live will attract a certain type of person. So what you do in that Buddha field has a kind of quality to it, and that quality is reflected in others and will attract beings of the same quality. So if you're sort of wondering who you are and what your qualities are, look at the beings that you attract around you. Look at the beings around you, because we sort of gravitate towards the same qualities. And what that means is we create a particular kind of Buddha field according to our practice. So if we want a particular type of Buddha field, there's no point complaining to other people that they haven't set it up for you to benefit from. You have to develop those qualities in yourself, and that will attract other beings to develop those qualities. So how the Buddha puts it is, he says, a Bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of generosity. When they attain enlightenment, living beings who give away all their possessions will be born in their Buddha field. A Bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of ethics. When they attain enlightenment, living beings who follow the path of the 10 precepts with positive motivation will be born in their Buddha field. A Bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of patience. When they attain enlightenment, living beings with the perfections of patience, discipline, and higher states of consciousness, hence beautiful, will be born in their Buddha field. A Bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of energy. When they attain enlightenment, living beings who devote their efforts to virtue will be born in their Buddha field. A Bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of meditation. When they attain enlightenment, living beings gifted with mindfulness and awareness and concentration will be born in their Buddha field. A Bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of wisdom. When they attain enlightenment, living beings certain to be destined for the ultimate will be born in their Buddha field. So it's our responsibility to bring about a culture, a society, a Buddha field, according to our own practice, because our own practice will be reflected outside of ourselves. So it's worth bearing in mind, what are we creating? And that will be determined by our own practice. What are we creating externally will be a reflection of what's happening internally. So the way I think about this is, if I'm busy rushing around and quite stressed, that's the sort of quality that I will be, that will be my kind of influence on other people, which is not great, actually. But if I'm sincere and inspired people will I don't know whether they'll either gravitate towards me, or I will evoke those qualities in other people. So we think about this as part of our community at Ratnakara. Like, what are we creating? What are we creating in ourselves will be what we're creating in the community. And what we're creating in our community will be what we're creating in our retreats. And what we're creating in our retreats will be what people are creating in their whole world around them. And it starts with our practice. Each of us, each individually, it starts with our practice. So it's up to you. You create what you want. You create the kind of Buddha field that you want, or that you aspire to create. So another thing that's worth thinking about is what kind of Buddha field do I want, and what kind of Buddha field can I create? And then there's a third point the Buddha makes, which is deeply mysterious, and it's extremely helpful if you are actually engaged in the project of building a Buddhaland. And the third point that he makes is, just as Ratnakara, one might want to build empty space into something and might build it accordingly, but empty space could never be built, nor even embellished. In exactly the same way, Ratnakara, once one knows that all things are like empty space, a bodhisattva might want to build a Buddhaland in order to bring living beings to maturity and to try to buoy it accordingly. But a Buddhaland as empty space could never be built, nor even embellished. So just as one might want to build build something in empty space and you can't, in the same way, you can't even build a Buddhaland. It's like building an empty space. And yet, one might go ahead. I suppose what that means is that it will never be over. Even this great amount of work that we're all doing, our team, to create a new Ratnaloka, will never become our legacy project. You know, it's not going to be mine. It's not going to ever be finished. And we won't, in a way, just get what we want. It will be consistently building in empty space. There's a mystery at the heart of this work that it will never be created because nothing is ever solid or fixed or unchanging. Everything is always moving, including one's effort to build a Buddhaland, including one's effort at our practice and our efforts to join together with friends to create a Buddhaland. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is separate. It will always be moving. Always, always, always. And I'll probably end up with those nuns in that graveyard with a little page of biography in a file somewhere, which people might not bother to read. So that's the esoteric point, which is always worth bearing in mind. And then the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa moves. It moves from Amrapali's park to this person called Vimalakīrti. It moves from this kind of mythical realm. It's still in a mythical realm, but it kind of moves from this great assembly of beings into one human being's sickbed in the town of Vaishali. So it moves from a general description of how to build a Buddhaland to a description of it being done in the person of Vimalakīrti, whose Buddhaland is his house and also his society around him, his friends, his family, his associates. And there's long descriptions of Vimalakīrti on I'll read you a bit. As one who has rendered dutiful service to the former victorious ones, he has put down the roots of merits by waiting on many Buddhas. He had achieved inspired eloquence, had made child's play of the great supernormal faculties, was in full possession of mental retentiveness and the formulae which support it, had mastered the modes of self-assurance, and had defeated his adversaries in all their forms. He was immersed in the guiding principles of the profound Dharma, was adept in the perfection of insight, was gifted with inspired eloquence, was adept at understanding the motivations of behavior of living beings, and taught the Dharma according to their capacities. His deeds were always well considered. He carried himself with the comportment of a Buddha and displayed intelligence as vast as the ocean. He wore the white clothes of a layman, yet he carried himself like the ascetic. He lived the life of a householder, yet remained unaffected by any of this world's three realms. He gave the appearance of having wives and children, yet he remained celibate at all times. He was surrounded by his entourage, yet remained in solitude at all times. He appeared decked out in jewellery, yet he was cloaked at all times in the marks of greatness. He appeared to subsist on food and drink, yet at all times his nourishment came from meditation. He was assiduous in all his business dealings, yet had no desire for profit or property. He immersed himself in state affairs in order to protect living beings. So there's a lot in the figure of Vimalakīrti, but for our own purposes, he's engaged and appears as a layman, but there's something else going on, something very deep and mysterious. Nothing is as it seems. He appears as a layman living an ordinary life, and yet he's not ordinary. He's an example of the creative mind in action, and he's doing what he needs to do in society for the benefit of all beings. So there's a common misconception about Vimalakīrti, which is that he's a sort of example, sort of propagating the lay life and saying, well, you know, you don't need to be a monk or a nun, you can be like Vimalakīrti, as a kind of role model for lay life, which in some ways he is, but he's much, much more than that. He spent lifetimes waiting on the Buddhas, developing a creative mind that's loving, that's aware, that's wise. And the lay life is sort of appearance. He's not actually just an ordinary person. And at the same time as the Buddha talking to the Licchavi youths, Vimalakīrti has a thought. I'm on my sick bed. Why is the Buddha not coming to visit me? And at that same time, the Buddha had a thought. Let's send someone to go and visit Vimalakīrti. And what that shows us is that all the time, Vimalakīrti is in touch with this higher realm, and that higher realm is in touch with him. There's a communication going on. There's something of him that is in relation to the Buddha with all his great retinue in Amrapali's park. So where do we stand in relation to Vimalakīrti? It's easy to either just say, well, Vimalakīrti is amazing, that's just like one of these weird Mahayana sutras, it's nothing to do with me, and dismiss him. He's so wise and good and creative, and I'm not. Or it's tempting to sort of bring him down to our level and just say, well, that just goes to show you don't really need to make any changes in your life. You can just go to gaming houses and brothels and teach living beings. So one has to remember one isn't quite Vimalakīrti yet. And gaming houses, casinos and brothels might have more of an influence on your mind than your mind might have on a brothel or a gaming house. He does say he goes to both those places, just I didn't make that up. So yes, so it's easy to kind of dismiss him and bring him down to our level, but there is also an example in Vimalakīrti for us to always keep in touch with our inspiration, to allow something of ourselves to be tuned in to what I've just called sacred, to be tuned into this kind of mythological realm of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Arahants and gods and goddesses and mythical beings, always calling out to us, but there's something more. This isn't it. There's something more. Listen to your own aspiration for something higher. Listen, it's there. It's there, it's quiet. It's not on your mobile phone. And Vimalakīrti, if you go into the sutra, which we won't have time to do, but right now, but he's not concerned with making us feel better. Vimalakīrti is also the supreme spiritual friend, concerned with our liberation, not comfortable. I remember when I did come across Buddhism for that first time and started to really practice, it wasn't an easy space. I was challenged. Sometimes I was bored, sometimes I was annoyed, but always it felt slightly risky. It felt slightly risky to be involved in the Buddhism. It is slightly risky to be involved with the Buddha Dharma because you will be changed in ways that you won't have fully anticipated. You won't be the same coming out as when you went in. You're not the same when you meet Vimalakīrti as when you first meet him, as when he leaves. And this comes out in the sutra. So Vimalakīrti is there. He's the sort of supremely creative individual building a Buddhaland in a world that's confusing and dangerous and difficult. He's sick. And in being sick, he's reflecting the realities of old age, sickness and death. And giving us a reminder that we live in a reality that's sometimes harsh. So here he is. It's sort of moved from the archetypal realm into the realm of a lived reality. Because in the end, the spiritual life has to be lived, and enlightenment has to be attained in the world with our friends, who we all are, and all our perfections and imperfections. So sometimes we're a bit more like Licchavi used than at other times. But in all of that, we work together to create the Buddhaland and to remain creative in the realities of this confusing and difficult world. And it's worth it. It's worth it if we can undertake that kind of project of bringing about the Buddha field in the Saha world, the impure world, the world of difficulty and confusion. And if we work together on the basis of our aspirations, if we listen to our own personal aspirations, if we come together on the basis of those aspirations, if we see our aspirations reflected in others, and we work together to create a field of influence, a Buddha field, we'll become quite a force in society. And that's not by trying. It's not by kind of consciously going out and being a kind of Buddhist warrior converting all living beings. That's not the point. It's by the sheer weight of our own being. You become a substantial being working together with other substantial beings and creating something of extreme importance and profundity. And that's what the Buddhaland and building the Buddhaland really is in the Vimalakīrti Nirdeśa.
Thank you so much for the talk. I feel like, I just feel like you really sort of colored in the Mahayana sutta we have heard yesterday. Sort of like, I just see this black and white picture, and now it's just full of colors. Just bringing it down to, I don't know, just make it more accessible for us, and how we, how we have an influence on other people. With I love that image of the vase and our heart and then the umbrellas joining together. So thank you very much for just sparking us. Let's give her another hand. So we just have